Retro.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continuously unexpected. So uncivilized.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And this midweek episode of Podcast Stardust is devoted to the High Republic with a discussion of Edge of Balance Volume 3. But before we get into that, Jay, where can we be found around the internet?
We are easily found, Dennis, on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dish is aligned, the signal is boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, and we're now broadcasting to the galaxy. So we're playing a bit of catch-up. We were trying to figure out how to round out our month of podcasting, and it occurred to us that there was a volume of the Edge Balance that we never actually got to, and this came out last fall. So we are way overdue for our discussion of this. It will be a full spoiler discussion. This is, of course, the manga series that they've been doing as part of their multimedia publishing initiative. And so there we are. This was written by Shima Shinya and Daniel José Older. Art by Mizuki Sakakibara. Does that look right to you, Jay? Or sound right to you? I don't
Sounds good.
Yeah.
You did good.
So again, we're picking up with the story of Lily Tora-Asi. She is in charge of the Jedi Temple on Banshee. This is set after the fall of Starlight Beacon and after the Jedi have been recalled to Coruscant, and the Guardian Protocol has been put in place, and she refused to obey that order, and now we're kind of moving things forward here. This takes place after Avar Kriss has managed to get back from the occlusion zone, and the Jedi now have ways of getting back and forth and the like. So that's our setup. What did you think about the story overall, Jay?
Well, it was great to revisit this because I have really actually enjoyed the journey of Lily Tora-Asi as a character, because this is really the only place that we see her. And so it was kind of like going back to an old friend, not only in that way, but also just in the fact that, as you said, we haven't done anything with the High Republic for quite a while now. Our focus has just been elsewhere. And so just getting back into my mindset of the story arcs and everything that was going on was just, like kind of like a warm hug from the past in a way, which sounds kind of weird. But yeah, I mean, this is a fun little manga in terms of it's got a lot of integral things that's been going on within the galaxy, as far as the Nihil and the Nameless and the Blight, and then also just the struggles of reestablishing some things going on Banshee and some other areas as well, and some great interactions between characters.
Yeah. This manga is where we got Azlin Rell from, and he's turned into a kind of a major character here in Phase 3. He's a human that should long past have died, because he was around for Phase 2, which is 100 years prior to this, but he fell to the dark side, and he's kind of used that to prolong his life as he's trying to figure out the secret of the Nameless. And of course, Yoda went and found him, and now has brought him into the story. So he features prominently in this. But I agree with you. It's good to see Lily Tora-Asi. It's kind of funny. You get to the back of this manga, and they kind of have an art update on this. And so they're showing how they updated Lily's character, and it's mainly by making her hair a little bit longer. That's the note that they put on it. Longer hair, one side tucked behind an ear. And then we've got Vivnia and Nima, the two younglings. And then Vivnia's got a new headpiece, and they've grown slightly taller. That's the art update if we get those characters. So kind of neat getting those things at the end, but it's like, yeah, we got that part. So thanks so much for that. But you made mention that we've got a couple different things going on here. We got the Drengir show up, the Nihil show up. Arkoff returns here and brings, and then we got eventually the arrival of Yoda, Azlin Rell, Reese Silas makes an appearance in this. I think this is his first time in the manga as well. And then we get to see Niv Drendow, who is Dr. Boolian's kind of protege with the Nihil, and he does a lot of experiments on force-sensitive creatures and the like. And then Master Sav is who's debuted in Volume 2, I believe, is here as well. Did you have a particular storyline here that you preferred or liked better than the rest?
Well, I was really kind of into like the wood people, I'm not gonna lie. And that like the civilians who kind of came back
Dringified.
and were drangified. Oh, I like that. And they were trying to give them warnings. It was
Yeah.
very, very creepy, but also just I don't know, it was Star Wars, but not. And I loved how they incorporated that, and it just really captivated my attention, and that was the main thing that stood out to me. But I did like seeing Niv Drendow in this as well because
Uh-huh.
we get him in. Isn't he the one that was also in one of the other books that was he was talking to the thing saying my precious and almost like you know what I
No,
mean?
that was one of Boolian's children. The
Okay,
little
okay, okay, okay.
the force sensitives that he kind of manipulated and altered.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So that was who that was. So I was
Yeah.
confusing the two, but that was still a cool character nonetheless.
Yeah, yeah, he has no patience at all.
Mhm.
he's he's been described otherwise as this protege of Boolian, and he's got a temper, and he really knows that he's a genius, and he doesn't suffer fools gladly, and the like. And but Boolian sends him eventually. We're going to have to kind of add some organization here to our discussion, but since we're on the topic of this guy, midway through the story, he is on Astenban, which is another planet in the system. It's a moon actually, and its orbit takes it in and out of the occlusion zone. And the Jedi know that when this moon gets into the occlusion zone, the Nihil will set up there for an attack on Banshee. And sure enough, that's what happened. But while he's there looking for force sensitive creatures that he can experiment on, Boolian says, "Yeah, you need to go attack Banshee, and so take the nameless with you and go get it done." He doesn't want to do it, but finally he does begrudgingly, and yeah, he's got a temper to him here. But I want to revisit for a second the whole point you were making about these people that have been Drengirified, and been turned into wood. You're right. It's a very unusual thing for Star Wars. And in fact, if we don't have this manga series, I don't think we get this at all.
Mhm.
And here, this is something that seems very, not that I've read that much manga, but it seems like kind of very much a Japanese idea, I think.
Mhm.
I'm going to have to guess that it was one of the other authors, and not Daniel José Older or Justina Ireland, who wrote one of the earlier volumes of this, that came up with that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a
Yeah.
fair estimate.
Yeah. And then along with that, one of the reasons why they're able to revive is that there is a Drengir on this planet that had gone into stasis, but when Starlight Beacon fell, it emerged, and it even tells the Jedi this, that was able to come back after the destruction of Starlight Beacon, and it's warning them to run.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of trying to form an alliance here. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I mean, these Drengified people, all I could think of was, if someone knew one of them that had died and then come back as this, like, how terrible would that be?
Uh-huh.
But, to answer your question, it, brings me back to when we were trying to understand as far as like how the Blight and the Drengir were actually kind of related to each other in a lot of ways, and that there was some feeling that they were forced to do the things that they were doing, and that yes, there was this dark side energy to them, but that it was not completely malicious. And
Uh-huh.
so you almost had like some empathy a little bit for them in that way. And so, these wooden people, these Drengified people were trying to warn them, but yet there was also, this cautionary feeling from the Drengir that, yeah, they were kind of doing this out of their instinct, but yet there was something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this Drengir shows up and it's saying, there's this rot that is going through the deep roots here, and we kind of got that feeling from the books that because Markion is trying to take advantage of that. He's found this blight and he's trying to spread it through the Drengir. He threw a piece of it at the Drengir, hoping that it would then spread across the galaxy, so he could be the one that comes in as the savior of all of this. And I got the feeling here that the Drengir had more of a connection to the Force based on what this particular one was saying than I think I previously realized. Did you get that feeling, or what was your take on that?
Oh yeah, because it was basically warning them of the blight.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't even explain whether the Nihil created the blight, but just warns that they fear it. So yeah, there's like this whole thing going on with them. But I think you're right, as far as like we've always not known, but it's always been hinted, like I said, that they were more dark side. But I think there's definitely more to it than that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's but it goes on to say later after Niv Drendow shows up with the Nile and some Nameless, and he's like, we're not affected by this, and he agrees to help them kind of fight off the Nameless here. I'm curious what happens to the Drengir after this, because
Right?
Avar Kriss and her band of Jedi defeated them in the first volume, in the Phase 1 comics that Kevin Scott wrote, and they put the matriarch, the progenitor, I think is what they called it, into stasis. But that was on Starlight Beacon, and then Starlight Beacon crashed, and so now there's been this threat, and we've seen them reemerge, but we normally see them like dead in the places that Markion Rowe found them. And now this one shows up, and it's got a bounce in its step, but it's afraid, and it's trying to warn these people, and then the Nile shows up. So, there was kind of an alliance with the Drengir and the Nile. The Drengir were trying to seed, or the Nile were trying to seed the Drengir in certain places and help them spread. And now the Drengir are like, we don't want anything to do with that, but they don't show up anywhere after the High Republic, as far as we're aware. So I'm kind of curious about what their final fate is going to be in all this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Azlin Rell. Okay. First, we see Azlin Rell when Lily and Arkoff and the like send a message to Coruscant to get Yoda's advice about what's going on with these wooden people and the potential for the Nile to show up. And Yoda's there, and Azlin Rell's with him. Oh, what did you think of Yoda's appearance in the manga? How he looked?
I thought it was awful.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, I'm sorry. It was just not. I mean, you could tell because you knew that it was Yoda, but yeah, I just thought it was not very well represented. That's just my feeling. How do you feel?
I'm with you. There's just something wrong. It doesn't look like Yoda enough. And look, you might excuse it by saying that they tried to de-age Yoda by 100 years. Okay, that's fine. But they made his face almost a little too smooth and flat. And then if you look at someone like Grogu, who's the same species,
right,
they didn't get it right to make a younger looking person of that species. It just looked like Yoda's face had been compressed and kind of stretched out a little bit there.
yes.
Okay. Well, that's my big criticism of the art. I thought for the most part the art was really good in this manga, but they just didn't get Yoda right on this. But Azlin Rell's got a journal that's there on Banshee, and they want to keep it safe, so they're going to go there to help head off the Nile. And Reef, who's been working with Azlin Rell in some of the adult novels that we've read and discussed here on the show, is going with them. I kind of feel like Reef kind of backslid a little bit because, he had, when we first met him, he wanted to be an archivist. He wanted to work in the Jedi, with the Jedi texts in the library of the Jedi and in the archives. But then he was forced out of his comfort zone. And that's when the Drengir emerged. He was there on that station, whose name escapes me at the moment. And then it was after that when he asked Master Komek to be his new master after his master got killed, that he had that epiphany. It's like, I need to get out of my comfort zone. I need to be out in the field. I need to do these things. And now he's been tasked with all this research, and he's been working with Azlin. I think he got comfortable being at the Jedi Temple again. And now here he is. It's being suggested that he should go on this mission with Yoda because he's got experience with the Drengir, and he's kind of resistant to that at first. What'd you think?
Yeah, he is, and you're right, I think he did kind of reestablish his little comfort zone back, just doing all of the research,
Mm-hmm.
and so he's definitely resistant to that, but, I mean, Yoda basically just says, "Hey, you're watching over Rell, and, you've got this research and connection between the Nameless and the Blight, we can use it," and so, yeah, he
Yeah, I was
wants
kind of
him to
hoping to
do
bring
it.
Azazo, or is that his name? The Padawan we met in the last book, who lost his master with him, but he didn't
Mm,
show up. Azlin Rell is Arkoff's former Padawan, which one thing that they never address is that, Lily was Arkoff's Padawan as well. And so in a way,
mhm,
they're kind of like, of a generation. If you like drawing the Jedi out as a family tree based on masters and apprentices, but they never bring that up. They never address that. And Arkoff is kind of harboring, I'm not sure how to describe it, but like, I don't know if it's necessarily it's a doubt or almost kind of like a darkness, or he's just kind of unsettled about Aslan Rell's past
mhm,
because Aslan was there on Dalna at the Night of Sorrow at the end of Phase 2, and his encounters with the Nameless really, I mean, changed him. He fell to the dark side. He has not been able to get over that fear, and he says to Arkoff at some point, "It's like the light is blinding, and I know eventually it will prevail, but." He's trying to find an answer. This is the said part. It's like he's trying to find an answer, and so he needs the dark right now. He knows fear, and he makes kind of comment on, Lily. She's got some empathy, but she doesn't know the fear the way he does here. And Arkoff kind of tries to. It's kind of hard to say what he's doing because we can't understand a thing Arkoff's saying because he doesn't speak
right,
English,
'cause he's
and
speaking
they just do the
Shriwok,
Wookiee
yeah,
growls there,
mhm,
and they don't do that trick where Aslan repeats back what Arkoff said in kind of like a question, or like the Han Solo trick, like you said it, Chewie. Where did you dig up that old fossil? That
oh,
type of thing.
right.
And so we're kind of have to imagine one half the conversation here. But what do you think of that relationship between Aslan and Arkoff?
Well, it's definitely stressed. I mean, here
Mm-hmm.
and when they go off to kind of speak alone, and they're walking together, and Rel tells him, he wishes that he died a long time ago, and he
Uh-huh.
never thought that he would meet Master Arkoff again. And then he takes off his visor, and he shows him his empty sockets. And so it's like he's haunted by the memories of all this stuff, but he's trying to hide the torment. And so I think that Arkoff kind of maybe even though he was reluctant, he might have gained a little bit more of an understanding. Not that he came to terms with it necessarily, but I think that he was able to maybe just see it a little bit more from his point of view.
Uh-huh.
But I did like the fact that, it's kind of like you said, this transitionary thing where, Arkoff kind of talking about Tora-Asi, Lily, that, he's got a lot of faith in her. And
Right.
so it's almost like he's saying, I've moved on, I appreciate what you're trying to do here and explaining all of this to me, but you know, we just gotta go our separate ways here at this point.
Yeah, but it's like when the Nile show up, um, Yoda and Aslan wander off with the younglings. And then, as one of the Nameless are cornering them, Aslan takes the lead and sends Yoda off with the younglings.
Mhm.
And, because Yoda made this comment about confronting one's fears, and that resonated with Aslan there. And so the Nameless charges him, and he catches it with the Force.
Mhm. Yeah, he does.
This is like the first time anyone's been successful using the Force against like
Yeah.
offensively against the Nameless. And so I'm like, well, is that the trick? Like the dark side? The way they've been going into the books is kind of like force deprivation almost, and rechanneling support and taking away fear and the like in order to counter the not. So I guess we're kind of following that same fear, is that Aslan's confronting his fear, and so he's able to confront the Nameless in this case, and ultimately like he's about to falter, and Aslan tackles him and kind of rescues him in that spot, and that when they have that reconciliatory moment. And
Yeah.
so I don't know, I just was really taken by that he was able to use the Force against the Nameless, and that's just not something we've seen be successful.
Yeah. And I think what really strikes me about this whole thing is that there's this whole underlying, concept of fear because, Aslan Rell talks about that a lot. He
Yep.
says, Rell says, Tora-Asi doesn't even understand fear. He knows what fear looks like. And, he even kind of accepts that Arkoff tried saving him back then, but he
Mhm.
was consumed by fear. So like there's this whole like thing about fear, fear, fear. So I'm wondering, to your point about him being the only one that's actually been able to repel that is that he's come to almost a realization that to not be able to see is to see.
Yeah.
And you were talking about like sensory deprivation in a way.
Mhm.
And so I wonder if there's some kind of key to that, is that it's almost like he's to the point of, I wouldn't necessarily call it desperation, but he's just kind of like on this plane of, I am what I am and what shall be, what shall be. And so it's just, he's able to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think there's something to that because, like, in different times in this manga, we'll see, like, how he's seeing Arkoff through the Force, and it's like this massive, horrified, distorted-looking Wookiee and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And so, but in that moment where, where Yoda's words resonates with him, it's like, confronting our fear. Well, what happens when a Jedi runs into the Nameless? They're horrified.
Right.
They begin feeling fear. They become incapacitated. And it seems like for the first time, I'm starting to get it. Aslan's plan was, well, what's the path to dark side? Well, Yoda's told us, fear leads to
Fear.
anger leads to hate leads to suffering, and that's the path to the dark side. So he was getting strength from the fear to try and fight the Nameless. But what he discovered in this case was that it wasn't using the fear, it was confronting the fear. And so he
Hmm.
wasn't letting himself be subject to the horror that the Nameless brought. And so he was able to fight the thing.
Right. Right.
So I'll be able to it'll be interesting to see how they use this going forward. And then ultimately at the end of the book, at the end of the book, manga, I use those interchangeably, although I'm not just sure you're supposed to. When Sav returns from Astenban after she's blown up the Nile's ships and their little base that they set up, I love her. That was
She was
fantastic. We talk about
loving
that in a second.
that.
Yeah.
Yes. Relishing in
She,
the whole thing.
she kind of reminds me of Sabine there, being artistic with
Yes.
explosions and all like. But she shows back up. But she had taken one of the chief of the Bonchians, these little bird-like creatures. They remind me of Pokemon. They got 4 little legs,
Oh, yeah,
uh,
there you go.
and they wear hoods. But there was another creature on Astaban whose name was Nimtok, who also looks like a Pokemon. It looks like a sloth that has some plants
Yes.
blood on him there.
Mhm.
But Nimtok
Slackoff.
is what's that?
Slackoff,
Yeah.
the Pokemon.
Oh, okay. I wasn't familiar with that one,
Sorry.
but that's all right. It just threw me for a second. But Nimtok was force sensitive, and that's what the Nile were there trying to do, was find force sensitive creatures. And when they were not successful with their attack on the Jedi, Niv Drendow says, the Nile report, well, we captured this one force sensitive creature. He's like, well, that'll be it. That's good enough. Let's get out of here. And Shosho jumped into the ship to help out Zemtok. And so at the end of the manga, Lily asks Master Sav if she will go rescue Shosho and help out Shosho's friend, this sloth creature. And Arkoff agrees to go with Master Sav. And so, and Aslan at that point, he's like very much at peace. He's like, I'll miss you.
Mhm.
It was good to see you again. And he seems to have found some sort of peace. So I can't tell if he's been redeemed or what the situation is there.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some sort of resolution. I don't know if
Uh-huh.
I'd call it necessarily redemption, but it's just more of kind of an acceptance, if nothing
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. Hard to say. So I'll be interested to see what they do with that character going forward. We don't have a lot of time left for this episode. So let's kind of hit some of this. I feel like we barely talked about Lily, but her biggest moments, I think, in this entire thing come at the beginning of the book. And we're basically being told that she's experienced a lot of growth because she's learned how to accept the fact that her former Padawan, Kieran, is now one with the Force.
Mhm.
And, she's learned to let go. She's learned how to handle loss, and she's grown comfortable with her own decision. She does apologize to Yoda for not responding to the summons to return to Coruscant, and when the Guardian protocols were enacted. But he's like, trusted your own judgment. You did, and apologize. Something to apologize for. You do not. It's. And he tells you followed your own instinct. You didn't just blindly follow an order. You did what you thought was right. That's fantastic. And beyond that, I mean, she's there, but I feel like in the previous volumes of this, she was the central character, and while she's the leader, this volume's not really about her by comparison.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, there's definitely some moments, and there's,
Uh-huh.
I think, some great things that are highlighted in her growth. Like I was saying, that she's learned how to basically acknowledge her emotions instead of suppressing them.
Uh-huh.
She's let go of some of her fears. She has decided to, respond to situations instead of trying to, like, anticipating the threats that may not ever happen. So she's kind of putting her energies where they are better served for her and for the force, which I think is a good thing. And then she's also, helping and being integral in helping the Banshees, too, and rebuilding the temple and, all kinds of stuff. So I just think that, there's definitely some presence to her, but you're right. I mean, she's definitely not the main focus, but still appreciate it nonetheless.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and what did you think about the Banshees and all this? They do anything for you? Do you feel like they contribute to the story? I mean, my view is that I get it. They're the inhabitants of this world, and they've kind of formed an alliance with Lily and stuff like that. But I don't know. I mean, I know this complaint came up with the Ewoks and Return of the Jedi, but it's kind of like they're almost too cute for their own good, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
They're yeah, I agree. I mean, it's more of just like they're almost a placeholder, if nothing else. I hate to say that, but they're just a point that, again, like you said, they're there to serve as, oh, okay, this is the natives of this planet, and this is who they're trying to serve, and this is what they're trying to do. But yeah, I mean, it was just the little Chi-Chi, ZZ, whatever things. Yeah, they didn't really, I mean, they were there, and I was fine with
Yeah.
it, but not my favorite.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, we talked a bit about Sav. I mean, she goes to Astenban and has a great time blowing things up. So mission
Yes.
accomplished there.
Love that character.
I do too. I'm gonna have to get into some of the High Republic adventures from Phase Two that she featured. I haven't read those yet, but she was a youngling or a Padawan in those, so I'd love to kind of catch up on her story with that.
Mhm.
Yeah, beyond that, I think we've kind of covered this for the most part. I mean, at the end of this, the Nihil have been driven off, and like we said, Master Sab's going to go after Shosho and Zemtok, and try and free them from the Nihil and Niv Drendow there. So I guess we can expect that, because there's another volume coming out in just a couple months. So we caught
Mhm.
this one just in time before that one comes
Yeah,
out.
there you go. It'll be fresh
So
in our minds.
right, yeah, and the Jedi seem to have a toehold here, right on the edge of the occlusion zone with
Mhm.
Banshee. So I expect that we'll get to see more of Lily and that adventure coming up as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up our discussion. I, I think this was great. It's not my favorite thing that's come out of the High Republic, but this is a fun story. I think it was definitely worth a read. I mean, I've read it twice in the side of well under an hour. It's pretty quick.
Right.
Manga does not take a lot of time to get through unless you stop and really study the art on every single page.
Mhm.
So I
And the
encourage
art's
everyone to.
good.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a few places that it was difficult to determine exactly what was going on, just because there is, like, it's all black and white, and sometimes you don't get a lot of shading, and so trying to just, you don't get the depth on the page, and so you're like, wait a minute, who's doing what in this
That's
image?
fair. Yeah.
But again, I mean, I think Arkoff is awesome looking,
Yes.
and Lily always looks fantastic when they draw her. My only real complaint with the way anyone appears is what we talked about already with Yoda.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
could have done a slightly, but that's not the worst Yoda I've ever seen. That having been said. So anyway,
True. There you go.
okay. Well, then that'll do it for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of Edge of Balance Volume 3. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to get our ongoing discussions of the High Republic, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And when we get some new books and comics, we will make sure we cover those on the show, and you'll get those episodes automatically. After you've done that, we'd appreciate it if you could rate and review the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. As we say a lot, and every podcast will tell you, that really helps others find the show as it drives the algorithms. And then if you want to find more of Podcast Stardust, you can head over to retrozapp.com, where our entire catalog of shows which is going to be all previous 867 episodes, which is going to be a lot more than you're likely to find on your podcatcher, can be found, as well as some other great podcasts on the network covering all kinds of aspects of geek culture. Jay, you already talked about our social media contacts, but why don't you give those to our listeners one more time, as well as where else they can find us on the internet?
I would love to. So, once again, on our social media outlets, we are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust, and we can be found literally everywhere that you find your podcast. So, we are also on places like Audible and Spotify. We also have 2 different YouTube outlets, so you can find us on the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. There's no videos, but you can enjoy a static picture while you listen to us speak about the episode subject at hand. And then we also have our Pinterest pages that have a bunch of different Star Wars ideas. So if you're in need of any kind of fun things that way, you can head over there. And then we also have, if you are in need of some goods, either some apparel or home goods, our TeePublic store. So we have 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of things from home goods and apparel and pretty much everything in between. So once again, the link to that will be in our show notes. And if you do pick up anything, be sure to snap a picture and show us where it ends up out in the wild. We'd love for you to tag us on one of our social media outlets. And once again, hit that up at TeePublic.
All right. I know you've been busy with cosplay. We talked about that a little bit here recently on the show, but why don't you remind everybody where they can find your adventures?
Yeah, so you can very easily find me on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And so, yeah, I am always up to something. So, whether it's posting in my feed or my stories, also just interacting with all kinds of other content creators and cosplayers. There's just so many talented, amazing people over there. So, head over to my Instagram and check out those stories. And you can find that at j.snipscosplay, as well as all of my other cosplays, including Ahsoka, the Fourth Sister, 2 different versions of Hera, my original concept Mandalorian, and much, much more.
Okay, upcoming on the show this Friday, we will be covering the latest in Star Wars news, and with Celebration coming up, we'll see what's there. And then on Monday, we are getting back into the Clone Wars rewatch with episode 6 from season 2. With that said, thanks for listening to episode 868 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and until next time, may the Force be